Hi guys. So today, I think this is working. So today's live is going to be with Lesley Kenny. She is a really inspirational woman I've followed for years now. She's got an amazing story to tell, and she's going to be sharing also about a nutrient that's very, very interesting. Let me add her now. Let's see, is it working?
Hey there, that worked pretty
Yay!
easily.
Good. The smoothest so far.
That's
Oh,
great. Good to see you. You look
you too.
lovely.
Oh, thank you. So do you. Your hair's got such a lovely shine. I always look at that. I'm like,
Oh, thanks.
yeah. Thank you for joining
Yeah,
us today. Really,
absolutely.
yeah, I've listened to so much of your stuff, and your story's just so inspiring. So I really want to kind of you to do as much as you can to tell us a bit about what your journey's been, if you don't mind.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, there was that article in the Independent earlier this week that talked about my journey, and I can't believe the response I've had to it. But basically, at age 39, the same age my dad was when he died, Um, and just as I was doing IVF, my fifth IVF with donor eggs, I came down with symptoms that felt like what I thought must be arthritis, went to my doctor and was diagnosed with rheumatoid arthritis, which is an autoimmune type of arthritis where your body, your immune system wrongly attacks your joints. But I was also diagnosed with lupus. And in addition to the immune suppressants that I was given to take care of the rheumatoid arthritis to tamp down my immune system and suppress it so I wouldn't do any more damage, I was told that there was nothing I could do about the lupus, that it would just continually progress and start, continue to destroy my organs. And there was no point in having children, that I had a good 5 years left to go. And when a person in authority, especially a medical doctor with lots of certificates behind them with a white coat on, with their name embroidered, right? Dr. So and so says this, you sort of think, well, is that it, right? Or many people even just say, okay, this is it. I have to deal with this new reality. And in my case, I did that Brene Brown thing where you say, is that really true? Right? Brene Brown always says we're supposed to ask that of the voice in our head. Are the things that I'm saying about myself, I'm not pretty, I'm not good enough, is that really true? In this case, I was asking it of my doctor, is this really true? Is
Mm.
there anything I can do with diet, for instance, to improve my situation? And she said, no. But I mean, remember again, this is almost 20 years ago, right? We've come a long way. I think many doctors now, some are better than others, will say, yes, you can do something with diet. But back then, no, and they don't want to mislead the patient. So some are quite careful about what they offer you. And so I left, but I really thought that was a rubbish answer. It was just unacceptable.
Mm.
And I had a lot riding on this fifth IVF. I was 39. I really wanted a baby. Took a while to get a multi-ethnic donor to to give me the eggs and everything. And I just thought, I have to do whatever I can, even if it just makes me comparatively better by just 1%. That's still that 1% closer to where I need to go than where I was. And so I looked under every rock for any kind of hope. uh, I looked at I looked at the research around lupus and rheumatoid arthritis, and I realized that inflammation was the root cause. I thought, can I do anything with my diet to, to reduce the inflammation? And I went on the Zone anti-inflammatory diet. I tried to optimize my sleep. I quit my job to reduce stress. and I was meditating. I was looking for any kind of trauma that was in my life. I'd had a bit of a difficult childhood, um, with my living with my alcoholic dad by myself, and did a lot of trauma work, which speaks to the work that Bessel van der Kolk has done around the body keeps the score. And everything. I did visualizations, and I did a very novel therapy for the time called intravenous immunoglobulin. And that was 2 transfusions of lots of other people's blood plasma. And a lot of people told me, do not do this because you don't know what you're getting. Mad cow disease had been a thing. What if you get prions? People, that's what the mad cow disease is carried through, or Jakob-Creutzfeldt disease is carried through, these proteins. And they didn't really know how to filter out at that time. And we were in the midst of a kind of hepatitis C crisis, where people who'd been given blood transfusions, earlier were getting hepatitis C because their blood transfusions had not been filtered properly. So a lot of people said, don't do this. But I thought, if I'm going to go anyway, I would at least like to know that I did so trying, right? Like, I really threw the kitchen sink at this. I did everything. Nobody can accuse me of just waiting passively for this to happen. And, within 6 months, I was in remission. And the 2 transfusions of intravenous immunoglobulin, which is also called IVIG, which now has a lot of proof behind it, that cost $24,000 in total. And I've estimated I would have now spent, had I stayed on just the immune suppressants, would have cost me or my insurance company over $1.1 million, and unknown amounts of heartache for me. Because after the immune suppressants stop working, of course, you have to change your social life. You're not allowed to be in the midst of a lot of people because your immune system is compromised. You might catch something. They told me to avoid children, which was the exact opposite of what I wanted to do. Avoid children because they've got all these, they're always getting sick. You might get something. So you have to change your life. You take these immune suppressants. They generally stop working after 18 months. They cycle you onto a new immune suppressant. You're constantly injecting yourself. The needles, although they're tiny diabetic needles, they don't feel great, It feels like you're, hurting yourself. And then you tend to go into methotrexate, which is a chemo drug. And I have met countless numbers of women who have gone on these chemo drugs and say, I can't get pregnant, because you kind of compromise your eggs when you do this.
Yeah, of course.
So, it's, I was very lucky, but what I think it shows is that if we give the body half a chance, it wants to heal. But we can't just assume that it will do it by itself. We have to do the work. And we can't also outsource it to our doctors because they don't know all the answers. And sometimes doctors feel like, I know someone who has multiple sclerosis, and she asked her doctor, hey, I've read about all these omega-3 fatty acids and getting vitamin D, how it's good for multiple sclerosis patients. We change our diet. Why didn't you tell me about this? And he said, oh, because it's too hard to do. It's too hard for patients to do. And she said, I have a PhD from Cambridge. I have 3 children. I have a lot to live for, and I don't think I'm a dummy, right? But it doesn't matter if you have a PhD from Cambridge. The truth is that humans have more power than we think. And when we are motivated, we can do anything. So, right? And especially if you've got children, which I know you do, we can be extremely motivated to change our lifestyle to support our body's innate wisdom to heal. And that's essentially what I tapped into.
It's a cop out when they say about diets because they don't know a lot about it themselves a lot of the time.
Right. Generally less than a day, if any, of education on this, right? Which is why it's so important for patients to work with nutritionists like you we've got to collaborate with people who have the knowledge like you and say, right, okay, I've got MS. Vitamin D, low vitamin D is correlated with myelin sheath, disintegration. So what can I do? You nutritionist, please tell me.
Yeah.
And using that wisdom, adapt our lifestyle accordingly, our lifestyle and diet, right?
Yeah. So within 6 months, you were in complete remission then from lupus?
Lupus and rheumatoid arthritis, both.
Yeah. It's notoriously hard to get rid of lupus. Like there's a lot of, books and people sharing. And I know that there's another doctor actually does lupus, like remissions with people, and it's just all diet based. It's all diet based. But
yeah.
Otherwise, I know that people notoriously as soon as they start that medication, it's just that's their life then. It's just medication life.
Yeah. Well, at the time that I was diagnosed, they said there is no medication. So I don't know what they've developed since, but at that time they just handed me, this box full of syringes, pre-filled syringes, which I kept in the fridge. And they said, this is, I think it was Humira or Enbrel. I did both. But here's what you need to inject yourself with. And there's nothing for lupus. So
immune suppressants they gave you then? Yeah. Wow.
Yeah, both Enbrel and Humira are immune suppressants. Yeah.
Wow, that's crazy. But 6 months you were in remission. I can't remember if you said in one story then you went and they said you were in remission, but they didn't ask you what you did or something.
Yeah. So I went to my doctor, and I had actually said to her when she gave me the news, and she'd done that whole thing where they call you, you're normally waiting for the nurse's office to call to say, yeah, your test results are in, they're normal, forget about it. Or sometimes, here in the UK, they don't even call you if there's nothing wrong, right? And instead, she got on the phone, called me to say, she didn't tell me what my results were, just said, you have to come in because I have to discuss your results with you. So at that first meeting, when she told me what my diagnoses were, I said, can I take this test again? And she was like, meh, yeah, it's your insurance, go ahead. Yeah. So when I came back to do that, and I had a follow-on appointment with her, and she looked at my results and was like, oh, look at that, must have been a blip. And I was like, oh, I've done everything. Like, I have done everything. And I had written letters to my dad, who I'd had a bit of a fractious relationship with. I'd, written down everything to get rid of the trauma, burn those letters, all this sort of stuff.
Yeah.
I did everything. I said, do you want to hear what I did? And like with the diet, with the Iboga, and she was like, no, that's okay. Because she's on a timetable, right? Our doctors are under the most incredible pressure. So I would never blame a doctor because the reality is that they don't have time to stand still and listen to a patient, right? And especially not here in the UK, where consultants have come in and said, oh, you have to see a patient every 6 minutes, and you're not allowed to talk about 2 different symptoms, only one. Right. Even if they never think, oh, they could possibly be connected. Yeah. It's always, no, we're only here to talk about one thing.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah. So how do they have time to listen to a story like this?
Yeah.
Right?
It's true, yeah, they don't have time, you're right. Yeah, as much as we feel like they're failing us, they're just, doing their job and sticking things off and getting through the day, aren't they? So.
And they're cogs in this, in the machinery too. And they've got tons of admin. I know doctors, I've got friends who are doctors, and they can have the best intent in the world, but just to kind of keep, treading water, they have mountains of paperwork now in the NHS that they've got to do. And if you're in the United States, it's insurance paperwork, right? Mm-hmm. So.
Yeah, I remember there's one bit of your story where you said, because I feel like this relates to a lot of people as well, that they were like, well, I can't remember who you were speaking to, but you were saying that, you're going through your upbringing. You were like, no, my childhood was like really good. And then you're like, oh, hold on a second.
That's right.
So true for so many people. We just like rose tinted glasses.
Yeah, that was Dr. Barry Petefield Durant, and he's the one who diagnosed me with the Hashimoto's. So I put all of this stuff into remission, and that was, I guess, by 2005. I was in remission, and then I moved to the United Kingdom. My husband and I had done the paperwork to adopt a little girl from China, and I was exhausted taking care of her, and I had a dog, but we had live and help. I should not have been exhausted. I wasn't working. And I looked at other mothers and I thought, wow, how do they do it? I just wanted to sleep in bed all day. So I put every symptom I had into Google and just, hit search, and consistently hypothyroid came back. And although I went to the NHS doctor for hypothyroid test, came back fine, went to a private endocrinologist in London, came back fine, just thought, no, something is wrong. Went to a patient community where other patients said, yeah, I had the same experience. All the doctors said my blood tests were fine. That's how hypothyroidism is diagnosed in Great Britain. Just using blood tests. Clinical symptoms count for nothing. You need to see Dr. Barry Petefield Durant, who's written a great book on hypothyroidism. And, go see him. I got an appointment with him. And what he did was diagnose me using some classical clinical diagnostics. So first of all, he had me take my pulse while I was in bed before I raised my upper body for 5 days, 5 mornings in a row. And he had me measure my basal body temperature, kind of like what you do when you're trying to predict ovulation. So I did that for 5 days in a row as well. And then he had me do a salivary cortisol test, which got sent off to Genova Diagnostics. And I had no cortisol. He was sort of, gee, I don't know how you're standing here. And he looked at my heartbeat, which was like 50, and which most doctors said, wow, you must be an athlete, right? Yeah, no, actually my heart can barely pump. It's so weak because the thyroid governs the heart. And then the body temperature was super low. That's why hypothyroid patients often have cold hands and cold feet. And he tested my Achilles reflex, which was very slow. And he said, I think something you've had this for a long time. I think something must have happened to you in your teenage years. Did you have a difficult childhood? And I was just like what you said. I said, no, I had a great childhood. Can't think of anything. And then it was like, oh, right. I lived as the only child, the caregiver to an alcoholic. He killed himself. I found him after he killed himself. Then had to go live with another family to finish up the school year. My mother lived in a different part of California. Their house burned down while I was living there. Literally ran down a hallway with flames behind my back. Children are so resilient. They just block this stuff out. Yeah. And then my grandfather died literally maybe 10 days before my birthday. And it was so sad because I'd been very close with my grandparents. And you block these things out, but that's how we survive. I think that we've got this magical thinking going on, especially children who come from really crappy childhoods, right? And we're always doing that future making thing. No, my childhood was great. I just will close the door on that, shut the box lid on that, and, make up stories about it. But yes, there is probably, what he said was there's a definite direct link between what's going on with your thyroid and your autoimmune condition and this trauma that you had that was just unresolved. Because of course, at that time, 1979, you have a parent kills himself, child finds the body. No, there's no psychiatrist there to talk to the child.
Crazy.
Yeah.
And you said it was a shock still left in your body that was obviously then messed with your thyroid, and that was what he surmised. And the fact that he surmised it before I told him. I mean, like I said, I didn't even remember it. I just was saying, oh no, I think I had a great childhood. Can't remember it all. Yeah, it's funny, the memory thing. You find a lot of that people don't remember a lot of the childhood. you didn't really want to. It's like a war.
Yeah, well, there's a story that we want. And of course, girls, I think especially, we're taught how we have this sort of fairy tale life. That's what we aspire to. And, for years, I also didn't talk about the infertility or the autoimmunity because I was frankly ashamed of it. I felt less of a woman for not being able to conceive like everybody else. Women would say, my friends would say, oh, I only have to have my husband look at me and I get pregnant. And I was like, you feel sort of a bit less
Yeah.
than, right?
Yeah.
So it wasn't something I wanted to talk about. But I think that once you go through menopause, it's like, I don't know, all the filters off, you don't care as much.
Yeah. So when you went to see that doctor about the thyroid, was that before your lupus diagnosis or after? When did you get that?
It was after my lupus diagnosis. It was actually after I'd already gone into remission on the lupus and the rheumatoid arthritis. But what we hadn't realized was that the autoimmune, my immune system had actually already pretty much destroyed my thyroid. So we could only see it on an ultrasound that I had about an eighth of a thyroid left. It was so small. And I guess because, often lupus, rheumatoid arthritis, and Hashimoto's come together, which I didn't discover until about a decade later that they often come together. But because they were only looking, I guess, at the arthritis, because that's what I had been complaining about, their test just picked up on the rheumatoid arthritis and the lupus, but not the Hashimoto's. I don't think they tested for Hashimoto's antibodies at the time, or thyroid antibodies.
Yeah. Wow, and then you obviously went into remission with your Hashimoto's and stuff after that.
Yeah. So I went into remission, but the thyroid was unable to create enough thyroid hormone to deal with my needs. So, your hair falls out, your hands and feet get very cold. I remember after I started taking desiccated pig's thyroid, dried pig's thyroid, which is, I take either Armour or IRFA, what Hillary Clinton is taking. My husband said one day, he sort of accidentally brushed up against my leg and he said, wow, your leg is warm. And I thought, oh, well, shouldn't it be? And he was like, oh, no, it's usually cold. Yeah.
Wow, God, that's very observant of him.
Yeah. Well, it's one of those things that you don't think about this stuff, right? You just kind of accept that your body is the way it's supposed to be, right?
Yeah. So at what point did you then, obviously, you discovered Spermidine? When did that come into, when did you first start taking that?
So that was much later. So I've probably been taking Spermidine since 2019 now. Okay. And that happened because I met a lot of great scientists here in Oxford, where I live. They were parents of my friends, my children's friends, and I realized that a lot of them didn't know how to turn these great ideas into businesses, and they didn't want to because it's a lot of hassle. They just want to do science. They hate asking for money. Brits hate asking for money. Full stop, right? Yeah. And I thought, well, I might be able to do that. I'm not shy. I can do it. And when I got into this Oxford science biotech ecosystem, somebody said, hey, I know about your backstory with rheumatoid arthritis, and there's some interesting work going on in the Kennedy Institute for Rheumatology, using this weird molecule that we all create in our tissues. It's in our gut biome, it's in breast milk, it's in semen, it's in all plants, and it seems to be anti-inflammatory, and it seems to have amazing powers to even rejuvenate things. So I met these two scientists at the Kennedy, Dr. Gada Al-Saleh and Professor Katja Simon, and they had done some great experiments in mice where they showed that mice that were age matched to elderly people, and Elderly people are basically age 60 and above in the UK. When these individuals reach that age, it's sort of between 60 and age 65, our immune system, those immune cells begin to forget what they're supposed to do. And so in the case of, say, autoimmune conditions, like I had, the immune cells are directing friendly fire towards your own tissues. But when the immune system malfunctions, you also don't properly identify cancer and you don't dispose of it. Because when you're healthy, you can see any pathogen and correctly say, that's not self-tissue, that is an enemy, let's dispose of it. So your immune cells essentially have amnesia. They can't remember what they've seen or not, and they just start, shooting at anything. Mm-hmm. So they noticed with these mice that if they gave a vaccine on its own, the mice had an immediate response, antibodies went up, but then they dropped back down. So it really, essentially, the vaccines for flu that we give to all of our elderly in the UK, a bit of a waste of time for the GPs and a waste of money for the older people because their immune system can't remember it. Mm-hmm. But they then noticed that when they gave the mice the vaccine together with Spermidine, that antibody response shut up, but it also stayed. It stayed high for a long time and actually outperformed young mice who were given both the vaccine, the flu vaccine and Spermidine. Mm-hmm. And the idea was that probably older mice have been around the block a few times, so their immune systems have a larger library of pathogens that they recognize, and they sort of know what they're supposed to do when they encounter them, how to get rid of them. So that led to this intriguing idea that we could potentially get better with time if we could just restore the memory of those immune cells. So somehow they knew what they were supposed to do, but they forgot it. So we could just restore their memory. And that's what Spermidine was doing in these mice studies. When I began to dig and look at the other things that Spermidine did, though, it was pretty amazing. So, we need it for fertility. We need it for bone health as we get older. We need it for prostate health in men as they get older. We need it for obviously for babies, mothers, in our mother's milk. Yeah. So the babies can grow. We need it for cognition. Yeah. Our cardiomyocytes, the cardiac cells, famously only about 1% will regenerate every year. That's if you're age 25, but by the time you're 70, only 0.45% of those heart cells regenerate. So I always think of them as vintage cars, and we've got to maintain them. Mm. And Spermidine can maintain them by activating the cell renewal process called autophagy.
Yes, yeah. Well, this is what everyone is fasting for.
Yeah.
Like, you know what? Let's just take Spermidine and not starve ourselves.
Well, that's the thing, is that I don't fast well. When I try to fast, I get high reverse T3. So for other thyroid patients, they'll know that the body thinks, oh, famine. Okay, well, let's not have any T3 around. T3 will cause your cells to burn fat faster. Let's hold on to fat because we're going to go into a period of famine/hibernation, and we need to keep that on our bones.
Yeah, well, I do think a lot of people that have got either adrenal or thyroid stuff, like fasting is a no-no, isn't it? So I do wonder though, because obviously the main, that's one of the I think it does 5 parts of ages, doesn't it, Spermidine? It helps, and autophagy is just one of them, isn't it?
It's actually, so there are 12 pathways down which scientists believe we age, at least at this point in time, and Spermidine definitely inhibits or slows those pathways, those aging pathways down. Yeah. But there is evidence that, in fact, Spermidine inhibits all 12 of those aging pathways. So there are things like stem cell dysfunction, mitochondrial dysfunction, telomere shortening, inflammation, autophagy, gut dysbiosis, impaired protein folding inside the cell, impaired nutrient sensing.
Yeah.
So there are quite a lot of these, and some of them will be more familiar to people than others. I mean, I think we all want young stem cells, right? We all know stem cells, good.
Yeah.
Healthy mitochondria, we definitely want those, and that's also very important for those heart cells, right?
Yeah. And telomeres, that's
Yeah.
something we want to know, because I heard your link about the telomeres and the grey hair.
Oh,
Um,
was it telomeres and gray hair? So stem cells and mitochondria and gray hair, there's definite inflammation. So if you are under a lot of stress and you've got a lot of inflammation, you're probably increasing the amount of adrenaline to hit the fight, flight, or freeze. You need adrenaline to basically deal with whatever threat is there.
yeah.
And it's not good for the heart to have a lot of adrenaline chronically in the body. So the body converts it into hydrogen peroxide. But hydrogen peroxide is exactly the stuff that we use to bleach our hair, to dye it blonde. And what happens is it's less bad than the adrenaline. The liver, if our liver is good, then we can use superoxide dismutase, glutathione, or catalase to convert the hydrogen peroxide into water.
Yeah.
But if we don't have enough, if we've been drinking too much, smoking too much, eating ultra-processed food, liver's sluggish, then unfortunately that hydrogen peroxide dyes the hair white, bleaches it white from the inside out. Yeah. And not good for the hair bulb.
So do you think spermidine's got like catalase or something in it that helps that process? Or
it's not catalase. What it does is, well, first it's anti-inflammatory, so that's a good thing. And we know that with the stress response, we know from a Canadian study where they were using a higher dose of spermidine, but also spermidine together with spermine, that they were actually decreasing cortisol in a 30-day period by like half. Right. Which is pretty amazing. And the other thing that spermidine does is it moves the hair follicle from the shedding phase back into the growth phase. So the growth phase is the only phase of the hair life cycle that melanin is produced. So it's kind of I can't promise that everybody who takes food-derived spermidine is going to get a gray hair reversal result.
Yeah.
But I can guarantee that you will not get gray hair reversal if if those follicles are not in the growth phase. And sometimes what people notice is that the texture of their hair changes. So they might not get color back, but as we get older, sometimes women post-menopause will notice they get like really frizzy, wiry hairs, or that their texture changes. And when they take the spermidine, the texture shifts back to what it was when they were younger. So if you're dyeing your hair, at some point, your colorist is going to say, when you were younger, your hair could take the dye, but now it's older, the texture is not right, it's not accepting the dye anymore. Yeah. So some of these people then say, well, I didn't get the gray hair reversal, but my dye was able to take better, right?
Yeah, okay. Right. Well, you're definitely one to warrant the hair, because your hair's so beautiful.
Thank you. I've had a very stressful year, so I have some grays here for the first time, but yeah, no. And I have much less now than I did a year ago when it was way more stressful. So yeah.
Right. Yeah. And the other thing that you did touch on then about, because I'm wondering, like, does the spermidine make your body uptake the nutrients more? Because like, because I've been on it for only a couple weeks now.
Yeah.
And I'm like, my nails just feel stronger, but I'm like, but it hasn't got calcium and silica and all those things, but it maybe is making my body absorb it more.
So keratin will be what strengthens the nails and what helps with the hair. And also you've got keratinocytes also have an impact on melanocytes, both in the skin and the hair. The other thing is that with the spermidine, in terms of, I'm just trying to think which benefits, you might be noticing. Do you have a sleep tracker, like an Aura ring?
Oh, that's what I've noticed. Just my sleep is just so much deeper. That's
Yeah.
that's immediate. I felt
Yeah.
that.
So that's good. That actually says that you are probably pretty healthy, because we have quick responders who will notice almost in the first night. They can see it on their aura rings that
Okay.
their deep sleep or REM sleep even will improve. There's some people who are slow responders, and I would say those are people who have actually depleted their spermidine reserves, like their cupboard full of spermidine. It's, been used to fight stress, or to fight, say, a virus, for instance, because it's very important for fighting any kind of a cold or flu. And they sometimes don't see results for between 3 to 5 months.
Okay.
And then after their kitchen cupboard of spermidine is stocked up again, then they notice better results with the sleep and with the hair as well.
Okay. Okay. Yeah, I know you've not got long, but I really just want to cover this because so it was like 2021 when I first went on your spermidine, and I look back at like photos, and I remember just washing my hair, washing my face, and I felt my eyelashes on my hands, which I don't usually. So I was
Yeah,
like, oh, my
yeah,
eyelashes. Then
yeah.
like my hair was so much thicker. Anyway, I think I got COVID then, and it must have wiped out a lot of my spermidine. And
Spermidine stores, yeah,
yeah,
because
I lost a lot of hair. I never felt
that activates virophagy. That's right. That's right. Yeah. So
yeah.
spermidine activates something called virophagy, and basically think of spermidine as the trash collector. So autophagy is collecting up the trash inside the cell and getting rid of it. Virophagy is where spermidine bags up the viruses and gets rid of them.
Mhm.
But um, it will always it will always prioritize the survival of the organism over, these sort of socially
Yeah.
significant things like hair, skin, and nails.
Yeah.
Doesn't care, wants to make sure that your organs survive.
Right.
And so that's why a lot of people who had COVID experienced hair loss. I think about a third of all COVID patients reported hair loss,
Yeah.
in sort of the month to 2 months
Yeah.
after recovering. Yeah. And that's why.
So then I did just want to cover the bit where so I think I finished your supplement, and then I was like, oh, there's another spermidine that's cheaper.
Yeah.
So then I got that, but then I wasn't consistent. It was only recently that I was like, oh, I'm going to start taking that again. And then speaking
Yeah.
with you, because like you've done the most, out there with spermidine, with education stuff. So it was like, oh, I just want to like learn about it again. And then you were saying about the synthetic, and I was like, well, no, it says food derived, but it was like so sneaky, that little
Yeah.
claw that.
So Guido, Dr. Guido Kromer, who is a well-known scientist who also co-authored the paper on the hallmarks of aging, he actually just said a few days ago, it is not, you cannot take synthetic spermidine. It has never been proven for safety or efficacy in humans, but there's nobody to regulate the industry, right? And so only food derived has been proven to be safe and to be efficacious in humans. And I think that's an important distinction, but we have a lot of sort of sharp practice in the industry where people are like, oh, I know, I'll take a capsule and I'll put a little bit of wheat germ in, and then I'll put in all the synthetic spermidine, and nobody's going to know. And I'll just write down wheat germ with spermidine. And that is technically
But they
correct.
said food derived. I think it said food. It's so
there's another one where they were, and this was actually done in the EU, and it's now being done in China, where they take, say, barley seeds, they soak them in a gigantic bathtub full of water, they pour in bags of synthetic spermidine, and they sprout the barley seeds. And then when you do that, when you sprout seeds at home on your kitchen countertop, you've got to put all this water in, and the seeds will take up whatever you put there. If you have chlorinated water, you're going to get the chlorine in the seeds. If you've got synthetic spermidine in that water, you're going to get that synthetic spermidine in those sprouts. So once the sprouts have sprouted, and have sucked up the synthetic spermidine, they dry them, they powder them, and they put them in capsules, and they say food derived.
Yes.
Okay, so in the EU court has actually told the companies doing that they have to stop this.
Wow.
But there's no regulation in China, and there's no ban on importing this stuff from China. right? So there, if you look on the label of some of these companies, it will say, oh, official UK supplier. All the stuff is manufactured and bottled and labeled in China. And it comes here, it's got the little Union Jack, and people feel like, oh, well, that's British, right? How great. No, not true. But there's nobody to really explain this. Now, I work with all these Oxford scientists. It's my name and my face on this product. It's my reputation at the end of the day. So as a patient, I'm not putting anything out there that I wouldn't put in my body. And I always say, you only get, cat only gets 9 lives. I've already lived 8 of mine. I don't have time to mess around by taking stuff that's rubbish for me. So I stand behind these products. I've gone to the factories. I have worked with our subcontractors. I inspect everything. You can see pictures of me in the fields where we get some of this stuff, even the water sources, because I just don't want garbage, right?
Well, I just come to realize that anything that's from Japan is usually like legit.
Yeah.
Japan's got the standards, haven't they?
Yeah, because they're very, very, dare I say, anal about food standards. They're really, really picky about this. And that's one of the reasons why I went there to begin with. So
that's great. Yeah, it was so sneaky. I just couldn't believe it when I told you the brand that I was taking. It said Food Right. It was actually from buckwheat.
Yeah, buckwheat. That was the buckwheat sprouts. Yeah. So you can do barley, buckwheat, rice bran. Yeah.
And do you know what was taken there? Is because I did hear you say on one something that spermidine is made up of 2 amino acids, and I know one was arginine.
Arginine, yeah, exactly, and S-adenosylmethionine.
Okay, yeah, because then I am prone to cold sores if I have too high arginine. So taking theirs, cold sore, and for me, that's completely to synthetic.
That's interesting. That's very interesting. Wow, that's fascinating. I have not heard of that before, but we do know other people who've taken the others that are with synthetic, and they say, yeah, I'd had all this growth back in my temples, this baby hair growth, which is something the Japanese traditional doctors look for as a sign of youth, is their hair, baby hair growth in the temples. And they said, and I lost it. And then they were like, so I went back to yours, and then it came back. And it was like, yeah, okay, proof is in the pudding, right?
It's just not cutting corners, it's really not.
Yeah, exactly. And, sometimes when you look in the mirror, it is a reflection of what happens on the inside, because it tells you if your body has the resources to, make eyelashes or hair or nails or healthy skin, right? So.
Oh, that's so good to cover all that. I did have, I think I covered quite a bit of it. Oh, that's just one more thing. So are you supposed to cycle it? Because, autophagy, do we want that every single night?
So you do want to take, it's kind of like the rubbish in your kitchen. You want to take the garbage out on the regular, right? And that is actually that's very important. Naturally, we would experience some of this rubbish clearance when we sleep anyway, which is another reason why sleep is so pivotal, so foundational to health. We should not cut corners there, right? It's no wonder that both Ronald Reagan and Margaret Thatcher ended up with dementia and Alzheimer's, because they were always bragging about, oh, you only need to sleep 4 to 5 hours a night. Yeah. And, but the body does need to do that on the regular. Now, what spermidine is not, it is not clearing senescent cells like fisetin and quercetin do. What it does instead is it rejuvenates the cell. So instead of saying, oh, this cell needs to die, let's get rid of it, it actually says, right, let's not throw the baby out with the bathwater. Cell is still here. Remember, again, those cardiac cells, those cardiomyocytes, aren't a lot of them. Let's fix it. Let's fix it instead and keep it. Especially with the heart, there aren't that many cells, right? You're not replacing a lot. Even when you're young, only 1% get regenerated. So this rejuvenation is better than apoptosis, than killing the cell off entirely.
But is that at a certain level? Because I know Brian Johnson takes like a whole gram in the middle of like at breakfast or something. So like
he's got this green juice, yeah. So he's got a green juice. I mean, I'm not privy to what I know he spends a massive amount with doctors and they're guiding him on how he's doing this. He's using chlorella, and I think he takes 16 milligrams. So it might be a gram of, well, it can't be a gram of powder with 16 milligrams. That would be, I've never seen a strain of chlorella that has that much spermidine in it. And I have really I've looked at hundreds of strains and tested hundreds of strains. So I'd be very surprised about that. But it's a very high dose. Chlorella does not have spermine though. And I would, prostate health in men, you want spermine too. Theoretically, you should be able to make the conversion of spermidine to spermine if your gut is healthy and has the enzymes that can make that conversion of spermidine to spermine. So we start with putrescine. Yeah. It then is converted to spermidine. That is then interconverted into spermine. But men who have been exposed to broad spectrum antibiotics may lack the bacteria that produce the enzyme needed to make that conversion. Mm-hmm. And so I think I would want to have some spermine. That's why we have a product called Primidine Original, which has all three of those polyamines, spermidine, spermine, and putrescine in it, as well as a prebiotic to feed the bacteria that make the polyamines as well.
Yeah, spermine, that was one question that someone had from it as well, like what's the difference? But obviously, yeah, you need all three.
Spermine's for DNA methylation, so for turning the good genes on and the bad genes off.
Oh, wow. That's so important.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
Yeah, because I know that, again, taking it before bed is when you want to be doing it, but he was doing it in the daytime. But anyway, I was just looking at his protocol and just like, I do like him because he's a bit crazy, but sometimes he's a bit too crazy.
It's a different approach. Somebody asked me about him and I just said horses for courses, right? I'm what I think I'm 15 years older than he is. And I just feel like, I want to live my life and enjoy it. Yeah. Am I going to have a piece of cake at a party? Yeah. Right? Occasionally. Am I going to eat all of it? Probably not. Will I take a sip of wine to toast somebody in a social event? Yeah. Will I drink the whole glass? No, because I don't get pleasure from it. But, you have to live a life, right? I don't want to be alive just to be alive for longer. There's no point in that. You've got to have joy, right? And pleasure.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Just watched the Secrets of the Blue Zones, such a great...
with Dan Buettner. Yeah, exactly. And they've got a purpose. Having been to Okinawa, I know. I see Sergey Young is here as well. And I'm sure he knows about, the Blue Zones and how the individuals there, they actually have a very slow life. Yeah. And they take pleasure in the little things, right? Famously, the men in Sardinia say that they are having sex practically every day. I don't know what kind of sex, because they're smoking and, as well drinking, but they take joy in their lives in the little things. And that is something that we can't predict for if we're just following a plan. Take 1 gram of this, take 2 grams of that, exercise for exactly 30 minutes, and you're quantifying everything. Crazy. There's not a lot of joy in that, I don't think.
No, it's definitely all about balance in life and unity and laughter and dancing and all the rest.
Yeah, exactly. So anyway, thank you so much for inviting me, and it's been lovely to chat with you. And so really we'll be excited to hear how your eyelashes come along now that you're back on the product.
I'm so glad I'm back on it. I really thank you for everything that you put out there and all the education, because it's really, really valued.
Absolutely. Well, thank you.
Thank you for your time. And hopefully maybe catch you one day in person.
Yeah, for sure. Come to Oxford. All right.
Have a great day. I'll speak to you again.
Thank you. Take care. Bye. Bye.